Yes, we're told it's down to heat, and I guess, Hannah, it's the same for everyone, isn't it? Struggling with the hot conditions, and refrigeration is difficult and sometimes doesn't work.
Yeah, and it turns out that the fridges are struggling too. We'll come to that why in just a second. But the heat wave did bring disruption to many of us, as you say, but some of the supermarkets really struggled to keep their cool. Welcome to our virtual supermarket, where everything's just fine now that the temperatures have dropped. But look at these pictures from the last couple of days. This is what some Tesco stores were like. Totally empty shelves with signs saying the fridges are out of order. It wasn't just Tesco. This is a Sainsbury's in London, which looks very similar. And here are Aldi stores in Northampton and Hexham, where they stopped selling chilled food because of the heat. Supermarkets told us the exceptional temperatures caused issues with fridges and freezers in store. So what happened to all that cold and fresh food that suddenly couldn't be sold? Well, a lot of it ended up going to waste. The law says shops can't redistribute food once a freezer or chiller has failed, which supermarkets say is important to protect customer health. One estimate suggests 250,000 tonnes of food is thrown away by supermarkets every year. And at a time when 6 million adults in the UK are facing food poverty, campaigners want more to be done.
We'd like to see it as a legal requirement for all big food companies to report the amount of food they're wasting, and particularly what happens to that waste. We think that should be a mandatory requirement, and if companies are starting to report that transparently, it will in and of itself drive improvements and also help the government to identify the sorts of policy measures that could be put in place to tackle it.
So should the industry be doing more?
Supermarkets do give away hundreds of thousands of tonnes of food to charities every year. They're working to meet tough food waste reduction targets, but obviously that can't be at the cost of safety. And food hygiene regulations would say that where a product has been compromised, where a product is supposed to be chilled and hasn't been adequately chilled, then that temperature control issue is a potential food safety issue.
Well, we put all this to environmental health. They told us that retailers have a duty of care to consumers, which also extends to when food is being given away. And it's worth saying that Sainsbury's did come back to us to say that where their food is no longer safe for human consumption, it goes off to be animal feed or green energy. The government told us the UK is a global leader in tackling food waste, and it's providing more cash to make sure surplus fresh produce doesn't get thrown out. As for the empty shelves, supermarkets say they're working to get stock back in the fridges as quickly as possible. Well, we have had quite a few messages about this morning. Mark works in a supermarket and says it's frustrating having to throw things away. He asks us all to make sure that if we take something out of the fridge or freezer, make sure we put it back if we don't then want to buy it, because he says that can also lead to food being wasted. Alison saw fridges being emptied in Warwickshire. She was shocked. She says she can't understand how that can be allowed when so many families are going hungry. We've been hearing about that this morning as well. And Graham asks that very good question that we had right at the beginning about why do fridges fail in the heat? Now, my understanding of this is really quite limited, but it's that they themselves, the fridges, get too hot trying to do all of the cooling down. But really, that probably is a question for an electrician.
Doesn't make sense. They're hot anyway. The backs of fridges are hot, but they're designed
with the air
for that.
circulation, I think, as well, and then it gets really hot. And the front of the fridge is also open in a supermarket often, isn't it? So I think it's to do with that.
That annoys me. That's a whole other thing, you know, when people leave fridge doors open.
We did have a comment about that as well, about why are the fridge doors open in supermarkets, so that people can take things off the shelves, presumably. But again, that is a whole other topic.
Why a fridge door opens?
No, why? Because they don't have doors, do they? Often in supermarkets, you can take things off the refrigerated shelf.
I don't think it's that complicated, really, because I think in principle, almost all machinery in extreme weather, either hot or cold, breaks down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things.
Yeah. Anyway, it sounds like we've got a lot more questions about fridges to answer.
Well, it is true, really, isn't it? It is true.
Chetan, do you have any expertise in fridge engineering?
This is my specialist area, actually. So what it... No, it's not. I don't. One thing that I would say when I was at Brighton yesterday, just to segue into the sport, they had 4 industrial-sized fans around the pitch yesterday ahead of the England match against Spain, wondering why that was. Apparently mould and bacteria can grow on a pitch especially during a heat wave, and so they needed 4 fans overnight to try and get that heat out of the stadium. That's some refrigeration.
Can I just say,
inside.
that was so interesting. Hannah's just actually walked out the studio.
She's gone out in protest. She's that bored, she's out.
When it got to mould on the pitch, Hannah was like, I'm done.
I was thinking, what can I reach to in my memory bank? But that for me was fascinating in a sporting sense. They needed to get that pitch, and look at it behind you. It looked perfect in the end. And